Okay, this is going to be short and sweet. We're going to start off with the Stage 35 review. We have the use of the ablative. We're going to see the means and manner of time as well as the absolute. If I look here, I have the ablative of means as an object used in an action. I gave you the example manu. Ablative of manner is how an action occurs. I use prudentia and gaudio. And then time is a specific point in time. I use nocte. So here we have quintus salvium verberavit. Quintus beat Salvius. If I use the ablative of means, then Quintus beat Salvius with his hand. If I use the ablative of manner, Quintus beat Salvius with prudence, so he didn't want to get caught. Or I could use gaudio and Quintus beat Salvius with joy. Remember I talked about manner, a lot of times it's going to be an emotion, but it doesn't have to be. If I use nocte, then I have an ablative of time. Quintus beat Salvius at night. So means is typically an object used in the action. Manner is typically, or it always is, how the action occurs. Could be emotion, doesn't have to be. Time is a specific point on the timeline. If it were accusative, it would be during the night, over a period of time. But the ablative of time is specific, very, very specific. Next, we have determining whether something is dative or ablative, especially when the ablative and dative have the same endings in that particular declension. Before I do that, I need to make sure that we talk about the absolute first. The ablative absolute is temporal or causal clause. In this case, we have salvio verberato. That is our ablative absolute. The fourth principal part of verberatus is going to be changed to the ablative. Salvio is going to be used as the subject of that ablative. Salvio, having been beaten, Quintus left, or after Salvius had been beaten, Quintus left. Now we'll talk about the difference between the dative or ablative. If it is a person, such as Salvio, the letter O could be dative, it could be ablative because it belongs to the second declension. If it is a person, it must have a preposition to be ablative. So Salvio by himself is going to be dative. If I add cum, now cum is a preposition, so salvio is ablative. Something that has personal qualities falls under the same rule. For example, equo. A horse can have feelings, I guess, or we keep it as a pet. We consider it to have personal qualities. It's scared, it's afraid of things like that. Follows the same pattern. If it does not have a preposition, equo is going to be dative. I gave food to the horse. It has to have a preposition to be ablative. So if I ob equo, I'd be walking away from the horse. Now it's ablative, but it has to have that preposition. Now when we're talking about objects, typically they're going to be ablatives, whether they have a preposition or not. We're normally not going to transfer action to an object. I wouldn't give water to the rock. I guess I could, but that would not be typical. Normally it will be ablative. It could be an ablative of means. I hit him with a rock. It could be an ablative with a preposition. I fell on the rock. So with or without a preposition, objects are probably going to be ablative, although they don't have to be. Next, we have the use of the supine. On your test, it's not going to ask you whether the supine is being used as an ablative of means, an ablative of respect, an ablative of manner. It's going to basically ask you, is it a supine? Do you recognize it as a supine? And is it ablative or is it accusative? They're not going to make you distinguish which kind of ablative or which kind of accusative that it is. Here I have my supine. Amo, amari, amawi, amatis. You can see fourth principal part is where I'm going to get the supine. I'm going to turn it into a neuter, and it's going to become amatum and amatu, fourth declension. It can only be accusative, it can only be ablative, and it can only be singular as well. I gave you three examples of how to use the supine in a sentence. Quintus ad villam canem habitum iit. Quintus went to the villa to have dinner. Don't forget, it is a verbal, so it can have a direct object like canem here. Then we have Quintus est difficilis auditu. Quintus is difficult to hear. That's an ablative of respect. They're not going to ask you that. They're just going to make sure that you know how to translate it and that you recognize auditu as a supine. Finally, we have Quintus auditu vicit. Quintus won by hearing or by listening. and that would be our ablative of means use of the supine. I skipped over indirect statements. Let's go back to that. The basic format of the indirect statement is a mental action or a speaking verb plus the accusative subject plus the infinitive. I gave you the example here, rogawit. That is an asking verb. He asked me to be quiet. There's not a question here, so that's why we don't get an indirect question. It's an indirect statement. He asked me to be quiet. Now that's a literal translation. Your test is going to ask that you know the literal translation, he asked me to be quiet, as well as a better natural English translation, he asked that I be quiet. What I did there is I added the word that, and I changed that accusative subject into I, which is subjunctive form. Subjunctive use, we've been doing that for weeks, so I'm not really going to go over those. You need to know indirect commands, indirect questions, purpose clause, result clauses. Finally, you're going to have to tell the difference between what belongs in a townhouse, what belongs in a country villa, what belongs in the country versus what belongs in the city. So this is the picture that you're going to get. On the left we have the country, on the right we have the city. So it's going to give you some words like Yanawa, both of them have doors. Odiosum, usually pleasure is going to go on the left side with the country. Clientes, that's on the right side. That's what you're seeing. Clients right there, talking to the guy in the doorway, probably trying to get in to talk to their patron. We have agricolae. Those are the farmers over there surrounding the guy on the horse. And then we have streptus. That's the hustle and bustle of the city. And equos agiens, riding horses, probably going to happen in the countryside. I would encourage you to look at 35.3 in your handout. That'll help you a bunch on this test, as well as reading through some of those grammar pages in your book. That will help you as well, because you do need to know what's in a country house, what's in a townhouse, and what's in both. Next we have the characters. Agricola, of course, is the leader of the Roman army. He's fighting against the Scottish. Britannia is the island that we're on. Caledonia is the Scots. They're really fierce fighters. They're trying to beat up Rome. They're being really resistant. Domitianus is the emperor at the time. Has some kind of affair going on with the Vestal Virgins. Germani, that's the tribe that he pretends that he defeated, although he didn't. He replaced the Germans in that triumph with the Spanish slaves, the Surly Hispani. Glabrio, he is in the city. He's writing letters back and forth with Lupus. Helvidius is the son of Lupus. Remember, all he cares about is women and chariots, women and cars. Lupus lives in the country at this time. He's trying to get over an illness. I remember that Lupus is in the country and Glabrio is in the city this way. Lupus means wolf. A wolf lives in the country. I'm done. Lupus is in the country. Martialis, very talented, artistic poet, but they say that he kind of favors the emperor a little too much. Ovidius, also a good poet, also has skill, but because he doesn't honor the emperor, he gets exiled. Plinius is a very wealthy man. He has some villas, some country villas. Surly Hispanii, we already said that they replaced the Germans in that procession. Solanus, he's been around Britain for a while. He's been fighting with Agricola. He believes that the Romans are still going to beat the Scottish because they are more brave and they have a better leader. Vespasianus, that's the emperor that killed Lupus's father. And then the Verginius Vestalis are the ones those are the Vestal Virgins that are being exiled because of being improper or being immoral. Okay, agrarian has to do with farmland or land. Vicinity has to do with nearness or the close by areas. Officious, it means that I'm very dutiful, so I'm being efficient. Relegated is to be banished. Rustic has to do with old-fashioned. In our language, it comes from, of course, countryside, but people in the country do things old-fashioned. Reputed is from puto, it means to believe. Rectitude is doing something rightly or correctly. Moratorium comes from more, it's to delay, so that's a period of delay. Caveat is a warning. Simultaneously is at the same time. Cautious, that's trying to avoid danger. Emeritus, if I'm emeritus, that means that I am retired from service, but I still have my title. Officiate is to act in a position of authority, especially in athletic events. Peregrination is the act of traveling. A suppliant is a person who is under me, usually somebody who's very humble, and you're making humble requests. I have two sets of words down at the bottom here. I have osis to create a noun, which means full of. So we have bellicosis, verbosis, victoriosis, anosis, and fumiosis, or fumos. So bellicosis is full of aggression, so that's aggressive. Verbosis is full of words, so wordy. Victoriosis is full of victories, so that would be something that is successful. Somebody's conquering everything. Anosis is full of years, so that's old. Fumosis is something that is full of fumes, so it's smoky. Then I have the second group of words. These are more associated with your culture than anything else. Carai are the wax tablets. The cartai are the pages of papyrus stacked together. Odium is leisure. Ergodium is business, and studia is the act of learning and studying. Here's a chance for you to practice some of these skills that you're going to have for your test tomorrow. Go through, look at the highlighted words, the bolded words, and see if you can circle the right answer. Give you a couple seconds. Here are your answers. For the first one, we have that paucus amicus is ablative. Right next to it, I have a big old fat preposition. If there's a preposition, it can't be dative. It has to be ablative. Next one, we have an introductory clause here. Although I don't have the macrons on there, we should be able to tell that that's an ablative absolute because all of the choices were ablative. The next one is rogatus est. That is a perfect passive. You might want to go back and look at some of your passive forms because there are a few of those that you have to identify on your test. Here are three more. I'll give you a couple of seconds to circle the right answers or to pick out the right answers on this one. Please don't circle on your home computer screen. That would not be nice. Answers here. The first one, audivicit, is part of an indirect question. Num is that introductory question word. Rogatus est is obviously an asking verb. Next one is supine. Should recognize that you, the ablative you, is a dead giveaway. Last one is an ablative of means. Cicero wrote his orations by means of his own hand. Next we have the cultural questions. I'm going to turn these over to my friend because my voice is getting tired.
Hello. What is the Latin term for a book that has a bunch of papyrus pages glued together? That would be a volumen. What Latin terms are used to identify slaves as secretaries? Well, we have the amanuensis, we have the notarius, and we have the librarius.
Here, let me have that back. Sorry, he's not very good. I'll give it to this guy over here.
So, what literary genre did the Romans claim to invent? They claimed to invent verse satire. What was the second literary genre that the Romans influenced greatly? That was letter writing. And what traits belonged to letter writing? That they had a greeting, then a body, and then a valediction.
Okay, thank you. Cicero versus Pliny, they're going to give you a list of things, and you're going to have to decide whether it was Cicero or Pliny. Now, I messed one of these up today, so make sure that you pay attention to this. Here, I'm going to give this off this guy.
Here's what I got. Lived in the 1st century BC. That would be Cicero. Since we're talking about something around the Vesuvius area, and Pliny is the one writing these letters that we're talking about, I'm assuming that Pliny did not live in the 1st century BC. Cicero did. Now, if Cicero lived in the 1st century BC, and this guy lived in the 1st and 2nd century AD, unless Cicero was 300 years old, it's got to be Pliny. There ain't no way Cicero's 300 years old. This guy was an orator and a lawyer, that'd be Cicero. Pliny was a rich guy that sat around writing letters all the time. Cicero worked for a living. His letters were polished and written with an eye for publication. That was Pliny. And Coach Trammell don't know what he's talking about because earlier today he messed that up. Finally, we have his letters were like newsletters that dealt with a variety of topics. Cicero.